I never thought I'd see the day when someone physically dragged my 78-year-old father out of an ambulance, but that's exactly what happened last Tuesday, right in front of my own house, thanks to one woman who believed her landscaping rules mattered more than a man's life. Yeah, you heard that right. This is a story about how an HOA president tried to kill my father over a technicality, so grab a chair because you're not going to believe how this went down. Let me back up a sec because you need to know the kind of neighborhood we're talking about. We live in Oakwood Estates, a place that looks perfect from the curb. All the lawns clipped to the same height, every mailbox painted beige flower beds lined up like soldiers. Even the house numbers have to match in style. But under that shiny surface, there's always someone who craves control, and in our case, that someone was Karen Wilkinson. If you just felt your eyebrow twitch at the word Karen, yeah, you're not alone, her name fits. My father, a Vietnam veteran and Purple Heart recipient, moved in with me about 6 months ago after my mom passed. He was grieving, he had a history of heart problems, and I didn't want him alone. So there we were, me juggling work and life, and my dad just trying to find a little peace in his golden years. But the thing about Oakwood Estates is it isn't about peace, it's about perfection. And Karen, well, she was the self-appointed warden. From day one, she was on us like white on rice. She had an issue with everything the American flag on our porch, supposedly 3 inches too big by HOA guidelines, and the old bird bath my dad loved because it attracted disease-carrying wildlife. I'm not kidding, she'd slip these pristine, typewritten violation notices in our mailbox, always signed, "Please correct immediately to maintain community standards." The woman even had perfect cursive. I tried to ignore it, I had bigger things to worry about. But the more I ignored her, the more obsessed she got. Whenever I'd step outside, she'd appear, big fake smile eyes, cold as ice. "Mr. Davis, we take community standards very seriously here. If you can't adhere, maybe Oakwood Estates isn't for you." I'd just nod, say, "I'll take it under advisement," and watch her jaw twitch with frustration. She absolutely hated not being able to control me. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that Tuesday. The day started normal enough. I was working from home, half watching the news, when I heard a crash from the kitchen. I ran in to find my dad slumped over the counter, clutching his chest, face pale, gasping for air. I could barely breathe myself. I called 911, hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped the phone, and the dispatcher coached me through CPR while the sirens wailed in the distance. Relief washed over me when I heard the ambulance until I glanced out the window and saw Karen storming across her perfect lawn, waving her arms like she was landing a plane. The ambulance barely made it into our driveway before she threw herself in front of it, yelling, "Commercial vehicles are not permitted to park in residential driveways." Section 7.3 of the bylaws. I kid you not, the EMTs hesitated. For a split second, they actually looked confused, like maybe she was in charge here. "You'll need to park on the street and carry your equipment from there." She barked, arms flapping like a scarecrow. I shouted from the doorway, "Karen, my dad's having a heart attack. Let them through." Thank God those EMTs had their heads screwed on straight. They blew right past her gear in hand, barely giving her a second glance. Within minutes, they had Dad on a stretcher and stabilized enough to move. I followed them out, heart in my throat, when Karen swooped in again, this time standing right at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, lips pinched so tight you'd think she was eating lemons. "I've documented this violation," she snapped, holding up her phone like she was catching a crime on tape. "The board will be discussing this at our next meeting, along with your unauthorized garden gnome and those hideous solar lights." I wanted to scream, but I was focused on Dad. He looked like a ghost. The paramedics did their best to steer around her and load Dad in. I climbed in after him, clutching his hand, whispering that everything would be okay. But then it got even crazier. Karen wasn't done. I heard shouting from outside. One EMT tried to close the doors, but Karen wedged herself between them, literally standing in the way. "You need to move this vehicle immediately," she shrieked. "It's blocking the view of the neighborhood fountain, and that's a violation of, ma'am, we're in the middle of a medical emergency." One paramedic cut her off. "Please step back." But she wouldn't listen. And then, God help me, she reached into the ambulance, grabbed my father's arm, and started dragging him toward the doors. "If your father is well enough to violate HOA rules," she hissed, "he's well enough to move this eyesore of a vehicle." For a second time, just stopped. I saw my dad's face contort in pain. The paramedic shouted. The heart monitor beeped. Lights flashed. Instinct kicked in. I lunged, peeled Karen's claw grip off my dad, and shoved her away from the doors. "Are you insane?" I yelled, my voice shaking with pure rage. "He'll die if he doesn't get to the hospital." Karen stumbled back, wide-eyed, not embarrassed, just furious. "How dare you put your hands on me?" she shrieked. "This is assault. I'm the president of this HOA, and you will respect my authority." And then, like it was the moment she'd been waiting for, she whipped out her phone and started recording. "I want everyone to see how this man and his father terrorize our community with their constant violations," she declared, voice shaking. You know what I mean. She was more worried about her HOA Facebook group than a man's life. But right then, backup arrived. A police cruiser pulled up, lights blazing. In our county, police respond to major medical calls as backup. Officer Jenkins stepped out, tall, calm, no nonsense, a guy I'd met at community events. Karen practically skipped over to him, finger aimed right at me. "Officer, I want this man arrested for assault. He attacked me while I was enforcing the covenants." The paramedics jumped in, explaining how Karen had physically grabbed an elderly patient in critical condition, plus the ambulance cameras caught it all. Officer Jenkins listened quietly, jaw-clenched eyes, moving from my pale dad to Karen to the paramedics and back. Finally, he turned to Karen, voice low but deadly serious. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the ambulance right now." Karen's face turned beet red. "Do you know who I am?" she hissed. "I have the board and our attorney behind me. These people violate at least 7. Ma'am Jenkins cut her off. "I don't care if you're the Queen of England. You're interfering with emergency medical personnel and endangering a patient's life. Step away now." But of course she doubled down. Reached into her giant tote bag, yanked out a thick folder, and started waving a stack of HOA bylaws like she was Moses with the tablets. "These are the regulations of Oakwood Estates. You have to respect our standards," she shrieked. That's when Jenkins took a breath, reached for his cuffs, and dropped the bomb. "Karen Wilkinson, you are under arrest for assault and interfering with emergency medical services." I swear the whole block froze. Neighbors peeking out from porches, folks holding their dogs mid-walk. Karen went ghost white. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president," she sputtered as Jenkins turned her around and cuffed her, reading her rights, while she kept shouting about property values and neighborhood integrity. The irony of her being paraded into a squad car for harassing my dying father wasn't lost on anybody. The ambulance finally took off, sirens howling. My dad made it to the hospital thanks to those EMTs. The doctor said even a couple more minutes delay could have been fatal. He survived, but just barely. 3 weeks later, I found myself in county court, watching Karen stand in front of a judge who looked like he'd seen every HOA horror story in the book. The evidence, overwhelming. Video from the ambulance paramedic testimony, the police report. The verdict came fast, guilty of assault and interfering with emergency medical services. Her sentence, 200 hours of community service at the VA hospital where my dad was recovering. Yeah, karma has a sense of humor. She got slapped with a $5,000 fine and court-ordered anger management too. But the judge's words were what really stuck. He leaned in, stared Karen down and said, "Miss Wilkinson, your role as HOA president does not put you above the law or basic human decency. I'm issuing a restraining order 100 feet from Mr. Davis and his father, and you are permanently barred from serving on the HOA board." You could see her whole world collapse in that moment. "But, Your Honor, I've been president for 7 years. Who will enforce the standards?" she squeaked. The judge just raised an eyebrow. "I suggest you find a new hobby, Miss Wilkinson, preferably one that doesn't involve harassing elderly veterans. Then gavel crack, just like that. Her reign was over. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. My dad was alive. Our home was finally peaceful. No more violation letters. No more threats. No more Karen. Her little kingdom had fallen, and Oakwood Estates, at least for now, could finally breathe easy. But let me ask you something. How far is too far when it comes to enforcing rules? Should someone with a clipboard and a grudge really have the power to risk a man's life, or was justice finally served? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've ever tangled with an HOA tyrant, share your story. I know I'm not the only one out there who's had to fight for a little bit of peace. And if you think justice was done here, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. You never know who's watching the neighborhood.